All right, welcome back, Sebastian here. So moving on to 8th in the constructors, we have Alpine. And I think pretty unquestionably, Alpine has been the most disappointing F1 team to start 2024 compared to where they were in 2023 and compared to expectations coming into the season. So before we get into the disaster that is these results up here, I want to go over the race by race results. So Ocon in Bahrain 17th, Gasly 18th, a pretty disappointing start. I believe they both they qualified 19th and 20th at Grand Prix as well. Saudi Arabia, Ocon 13th, a bit of an improvement there, and Gasly DNF'd from that race. Australia, and for Gasly's DNF, I remember he was reporting gearbox problems on the formation lap and basically retired after the first lap of the race, so not a great start. Australia, Ocon finished 16th, Gasly 13th. Japan, Ocon 15th, Gasly 16th. China, Ocon 11th, one position outside the points, and for Gasly 13th. And the last time out in Miami, I think definitely improved the mood of the team, especially compared to the first 5 races, where Ocon gets a point, 10th place finish, and for Gasly, 12th place finish was honestly an improvement. And it's definitely a sign that the upgrades that the team is starting to bring to the car, are definitely working and help kind of try to drag that car off the back of the grid. Now, moving on to the drivers head-to-head, a bit of a different story compared to last year. So for points, Ocon obviously 1, Gasly 0. Average finishing position much closer than you would think. 13.75 for Ocon, 13.71 for Gasly. So Gasly is actually ahead because I guess the DNF helped him, and then the sprint results are included, so that I believe 9th place finish in the sprint in Miami definitely helped improve his number there. Average starting position 15.25 for Ocon, Gasly 16.38. So definitely Ocon's been the better driver in qualifying, and the qualifying head-to-head bears that out. 5-1 advantage for Ocon, although it's been quite close. Average qualifying delta 0.171 seconds in favor of Ocon. And last year, 2023, it was a 2/2000ths of a second advantage for Gasly. So basically dead even last year. This year, Ocon has the advantage in qualifying in the early part of the season. So a bit of a surprise to see the gap be as big as it is. We know last year was very close, and you would expect this year is going to be very close as well. So I don't think it's necessarily a surprise that Ocon has an edge in qualifying. I think it's just more of a surprise how much of an advantage that he has. Last up, with average, with points above expected, according to my expected points model, for Ocon, he has 0.43 points more than expected. So getting that 1 point, not really expected to do so based on how the cars performed and his starting positions. For Gasly, negative 0.45, not the end of the world. Again, the car is pretty terrible, and the season is still pretty young. Now, taking a look at the historical comparison with Alpine's past seasons, this makes for pretty ugly reading. So 2022, the first year of the new regulations, 173 points, 26 points after the first quarter of the season. They finished 4th in the constructors, and their average pole gap was 1.27, which was 5th. So 4th was McLaren, but Alpine had 2 drivers that were working pretty well that year in Ocon and Alonso versus McLaren, where it was basically just the Lando Norris show. 2023, a bit of a step backwards, 120 points, 14 points in the first quarter of the season, 6th in the constructors. They got leapfrogged by McLaren, and they were leapfrogged by Aston Martin. Average pole gap was a nice improvement though, 0.865, which was did drop down to 6, but still being within a second of pole position on average over the course of the season is still pretty good. However, 2024, a bit of a disaster. We know over the winter they basically changed concept because they decided that the concept that they went with the first 2 years of the regulations, they felt they'd reached a dead end developmentally, which is definitely pretty bad, to put it mildly. And so they were basically forced to take several steps backwards, go back to a much more basic car, much less developed car, and then start trying to develop forwards again. The result is a car that was very overweight at the start of the season. They finally got to the minimum weight limit last time out in Miami, so they were carrying a lot more extra weight than they didn't need to. Very unaerodynamic, a very draggy car, and not particularly fast in a straight line. So there's just so many areas across the board where the Alpine was just a really poor car. So the average pole gap, 1.539 seconds, almost double what it was last year. So a massive step back in that respect, and definitely much further back than they were in 2022 as well. And that is 10th, so worse than Sauber, worse than Williams, and worse than Haas, dead last on the grid. Of course, they have that 1 point from courtesy of Ocon, which now moves them ahead of both Sauber and Williams. So they're sitting 8th in the constructors. We don't know how the season's going to go, but that 1 point could be very, very valuable for the team. And I do think the one advantage that Alpine has over particularly Sauber and Williams is that they have two pretty good drivers in Ocon and Gasly, where it does kind of feel like with Sauber and with Williams, definitely Williams in particular, it's kind of a one-man show with Sargent and Zhou not really carrying the weight respectively. And I think if you compare number two drivers, in this case so far this year, it would be Gasly. Gasly definitely a much better option than either Zhou or Sargent. But nonetheless, we'll see how it goes. And of course, both drivers out of contract at the end of this year. So perhaps, one of them, one or both of them are lured to other teams. Williams, perhaps Sauber, or what will be Audi in the future. And obviously that would put them in Alpine in a pretty rough spot, given that it's not going to be the most exciting team to go to, given how poor this year has gone. So anyway, there you go. There's my review of Alpine's first quarter of the season. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. It's always much appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.